Hey, it's me, your man, Ivan Hunt, host of the Keep It Moving radio show. Well, it used to be radio show because I used to be on the network, but I kind of ditched the network, so now it's just me on my own. But it's Keep It Moving. I'm coming to you live from Miami, Florida, but we're broadcasting on BeLive.tv, streaming live on Facebook. So if this is your first time listening to Keep It Moving, what is Keep It Moving all about? Keep It Moving is all about inspiring, motivating, encouraging, and empower people to take ownership over their life so they can live a life that's full of purpose, passion, and meaning. So as you know, every week I like to start off what I call a little chit chat. So we're just going to have a quick little chit chat about some things that just me and you just going to chit chat about. And I want to talk to you a little bit about, first, before I get started with my chit chat, yesterday was 9/11. So I just want to take a moment of silence and acknowledge what happened on 9/11. Okay, silence up. You know, I'm a veteran. So, you know, a couple of years ago, I spent New Year's Eve in New York. And I told my wife, because she's from New York, and I told my wife, you know, if I don't do anything else while I'm there, I want to go to the 9/11 memorial. And it was gut-wrenching. You know, I cried. You know, there was a couple of times inside the memorial where I just, you know, I broke down. You know, it was very touching. Horrifying even, you know, it's almost like you could actually, you know, still hear the screams, the cries. You know, I can only, you know, I can't even begin to try to imagine or wrap my mind around the horror that those people felt that day. And it doesn't make me hate Muslims, and it doesn't make me hate Islam. What it does make me hate is hate and ignorance. I choose to continue to look at everybody as a human being first. And that's something that I will always do. And I will respect individuals accordingly. So this week's chit chat, I want to offer you three things that I think can help you as not just as an entrepreneur, but also if you're battling some type of depression or you know, everybody gets in a little funk, and I myself included. You know, I'm notorious. So if you've ever heard the show, you've heard me mention about my battles with mood disorders. So you know that I'm pretty transparent in that regard. And you know, the three questions is this, especially if you're an entrepreneur, this really works really well. But also, even if you're just an average, you know, if you're not an entrepreneur, you're an employee or whatever the case may be. The first question you ask yourself is, who can I serve today? Find somebody that you can serve. And part of this concept I got from my training in Antonio Smith Jr. Business Institute. You know, he said there's three principles that every, you know, business should have. And that's, you know, one, you got to have a service. Two, you got to have a product. Three, you got to have a business system. So the question that I ask myself every day is, you know, who can I serve today? That's the first thing I want to know. And that's the first thing I ask myself. Who can I serve today? Because just asking that simple question, right? It touches on all aspects of your life. It touches on your values. It touches on your belief system, your spirituality, because it's about serving and gratitude and helping others and giving of yourself to others. And it just opens up, it takes the focus off of you and the things that you may be going through and diverts your attention to other people and by serving. And that's an important, you know, part of moving forward and creating. You know, when you start looking to serve others, it puts you in a creative mind state. And, you know, I think my guest today, Jimmy Murray, is actually going to talk a little bit about creativity and so forth. So, you know, I think it's important that you ask yourself every day, who can I serve today? The second important question that I think you should ask yourself is, what are my top three priorities? What are the three things that I absolutely have to get done today? And when you ask yourself that question, and it gives you focus for the day. So sometimes maybe just making up your bed should be a priority for the day, you know, and you know, if you've listened to this, I heard this motivational speaker talking about the military, you know, start off every day by making up your bed. And I was actually thinking about this earlier today. You know, the first thing we used to do when I was in the Army, when I was in boot camp, was make up our bed. That was the first thing we had to do. We had to do it a certain way. And if it didn't meet the specs, the drill sergeants will come in and just trash our bunks, you know. And so, you know, start off making your bed, set top 3 priorities that you want to accomplish for that day. The third thing that you should ask, especially if you're an entrepreneur, and even if you're not an entrepreneur, but just ask yourself in general, how can I generate a positive revenue stream for today? What seeds can I plant that's going to help me generate money? And it could be anything, positive. Keyword in that statement, positive, not negative. I ain't talking about slinging dope. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about joining the cartel. I've been watching Narcos too much. You don't want El Chapo to come after you. So we're not talking about selling dope here, right? And we're not talking about, we're talking about hustling, but we're talking about hustling in a positive way. Think in your mind of a stream, right? Of a stream or a small creek or small stream flowing from the top of a mountain all the way down to the river. It's flowing. There's a continuous flow. Maybe initially it just starts with a few little drops of water, that puddle, create a puddle, and then it slowly starts to fill that puddle or that swell up, and it starts trickling down. And before you know it, it starts generating momentum, and it starts accumulating and creating more mass, and it starts growing and starts flowing. It starts flowing faster. It starts flowing greater, and then it starts trickling into a bigger swell. And that pond or that creek or riverbed or whatever starts to expand. And that's the same thing with revenue stream. So when you start thinking in your mind, how can I generate revenue to create a revenue stream? That's one of the things I want you to think about, and start planting seeds that's going to help you, harvest those things, right? And to create that swell, that stream. So those are the three questions I think you can help yourself or ask yourself, who can I serve today? What are my top 3 priorities? And how can I generate revenue? So that's my little chit chat with you for today. So I'm gonna jump into the interview. So I had a last minute cancellation. And I wasn't necessarily freaked out, but I didn't really want to do the whole show by myself either. So I joined this group on Facebook, and it's called Podcasters Guest Director, I think it is. And so I put a post out there and say, look, I got a last minute cancellation. I need a guest. But here's the requirement for the guest. I need them to be energetic, engaging, and empowering. And I loved his response. He gave a 2-word response. I'm game. And that's all I needed to hear. I knew right then and there. I said, okay, I got my guest for tomorrow. He said he's game, and I believe him. So my guest this week is Jimmy Murray. And when he contacted me, I asked him, I said, well, what are your topics, right? And I love what he said. He said the first thing he put down there is, he paid $80,000 worth of debt down in 2 years. Now, hey, that's good, period. That's phenomenal. The second thing that he said, it really caught my attention, was that he went from homelessness to entrepreneurship in 6 easy moves. Now, I've been borderline homeless. I've slept in my car. I've slept on the floor of my job. I've rented rooms in, cheap motels and shitty hotels and stuff like that. And if you bought my book, then you'll see where I've mentioned that in my book called Boot Camp for Personal Success. And excuse me. And so that really resonated with me. So what Jimmy has done, he studied marketing and film and minored in singing. Hopefully he'll sing us a song before the big fall of 2007. Since then, he's taught himself coding and artificial intelligence and gone from bagel jockey to voiceover artist in 4 swift moves. His eye for efficiency consistently adds value to any and all businesses. He's a beast at content creation on all platforms and enjoys teaching people creativity. Above all else, he enjoys motivating people because nothing is impossible. I love the last part. Nothing is impossible. Good morning, Jimmy, and welcome to Keep It Moving.
That was a wonderful introduction, and I keep forgetting that I wrote that. But your voice, your very like red wine bassy voice, made it extra special to me.
I appreciate that. So tell me, Jimmy, man. First of all, again, thank you for stepping up to the plate.
No worries, my dude.
And so tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you calling from, or where are you tuning in from?
Tuning in today from Tampa, Florida, my new home as of last year. I moved here from North Carolina after growing up there for a little bit, and prior to that, a little bit in Washington, D.C. I've been all over the place. Okay, so one question. You just said Carolina. Duke or Tar Heels? Which one? Duke or Tar Heels? You're limiting me to that. I went to NC State, so I guess I don't get.
No. So you're not even part of the conversation.
Not that is correct. So saved myself that value.
You're not even part of the conversation. I remember growing up. I'm gonna tell you something really funny. Growing up, there used to be, you remember nursery rhymes, right?
Oh yeah.
We were taught this. If you're a Carolina fan, it says Wake is fake, Duke is puke, but the team I hate is NC State. Go Tar Heels.
Yay. Oh, that I haven't heard that in years. Oh, that takes me back.
Yeah.
Tobacco Road's just a fantastic bevy of rivalries. I love college basketball. I grew up in College Park, so I was always around University of Maryland, the ACC basketball. And when I moved to Raleigh, I didn't know how special it was until I moved to Tampa. And there's not like an inherent basketball rivalry here. There's barely a football rivalry between USF and UCF. Like it's really Florida State versus Florida, and that's one game a year. So to grow up in a place that has ACC basketball is truly a cherished local treasure for sure.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit. I want to jump right into this because, like I said, I love the fact that you said that you went from homelessness to being an entrepreneur in 6 easy moves. Now, the operative word that caught my attention was easy. Now, there ain't nothing easy about being homeless or transitioning from homelessness, nor is there anything easy about being an entrepreneur and jumping into entrepreneurship, at least my experience. So I'm just curious, how did you make those moves easy?
It's all hindsight. In retrospect, they were very easy moves, but as you're right, it's tumultuous. At the time you're going through these things, nothing's easy. Every decision counts. You said you were borderline homeless, so you know what it's like to say, hey, it'd be way easier if I could cook my own food, but I have to decide. I have to maximize like caloric value in my food, which means I don't get to eat meat or veggies. I get to eat potato chips for dinner, right? And so when every microsecond count, when every micro transaction or cent or dollar counts, it's overwhelming, but you just kind of put your head down and go through it. And for I know as somebody, what branch of the military were you in, sir?
Army.
So okay, you didn't.
Well,
I mean, I guess it's like when somebody's pushing you, and when you're homeless, you have to kind of push yourself. And for me, I made so many terrible maneuvers, but it was a matter of just regaining people's trust and just always making progress. So one of the moves was from Raleigh to Iowa, and Iowa is a cheap place to live. And then I moved from Iowa to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's also a cheap place to live. I was able to finagle a cheap apartment by a train station, and so the rent was really cheap, and I was able to walk to work at a time when the recession had eliminated all but the very menial jobs. But I was able to save money working at a Panera Bread, and so from there, save up enough of a kitty, save up enough of a fun, and then I found myself back in Raleigh, surrounded by college kids, and that's where I found myself in the customer service job. And I guess the easy move is just to decide a direction and stay that lane until something fantastic happens. And for me, that was the tail end of that customer service job in Raleigh when I taught myself coding, and that has perpetually landed me a job or a gig whenever I've needed it from there on out.
Really? So I'm interested. How did you make the decision, if you don't mind me asking? If I dig too deep, please stop me by all means. To move to Iowa. I mean, I don't know many people who by choice say, hey, I'm gonna move to Iowa. But so was it a strategic decision or something else because of the cost of living? Were you that strategic in it?
I will say it was a huge opportunity. So you're right. You don't really move to Iowa. You kind of end up in Iowa, right? Right. The running joke my friends and I had in my social circle as I'm going through these dark times is, Jimmy, are you in the witness protection program, or are you a felon, right? And it's amazing the dark humor that gets you through these times. But yeah, my aunt lived out there, and she said, I won't charge you rent. I just want you to rebuild and reestablish yourself. So rent was going to be cheap either way in Iowa. Free rent, I can't pass that up for sure. And amazingly enough, even in this small town in Iowa, everybody paid more than minimum wage. So since I didn't pay rent and since I didn't have a car, it was a really easy way to save up a lot of money in 3 short months.
Wow. And so what moved you to from Iowa to Pittsburgh, were you just as strategic, in that same situation?
This would be another opportunity. I guess this is why, for me, I can call it 6 easy moves. Also, it sells books easier. Um,
I hear you.
my, my best friend, one of the guys who's making fun of me for living in Iowa, was going through tough times. He's the guy that lived by the train tracks. He needed a roommate to make ends meet. He was finishing up law school and his MBA at University of Pittsburgh out in the Oakland neighborhood of the city of Pittsburgh. And he just said, I won't even charge you utilities. You just have to pay me like on a week by week basis. And to live in what compared to Iowa is going to be a big city seemed very alluring to me. So again, as I'm saying this out loud, it was kind of luck that landed me there. But I did have, by living in Iowa, I was able to maximize and capitalize on that opportunity.
And I love the word that you just used right there about, living in Iowa, you were able to maximize and capitalize. And, you kind of said that it was kind of luck going to, falling to your friend in Pittsburgh, without having to pay, full rent. But I also think, it's evolution, right? That
Sure.
when, you find yourself in certain situations and maybe you do have limited resources at your disposal, but if you maximize the resources that you have and, really maximize them, the universe, God, source,
Yes, sir.
has to provide you with additional tools for you to continue to grow. We are designed to grow. And so I love the fact that you used the word that you maximize your capacity there. You evolve. So the evolution was Pittsburgh, which was a bigger city from small Iowa. What's your take on that?
Pittsburgh being a bigger place than Iowa, or
no, just the whole evolution part.
Oh, the whole evolution. Oh my gosh, yeah. No, there's a whole you dug a whole golden cavern of nuggets of truth and wisdom in that one sentence. I should write that down. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just because you're in a bad spot doesn't mean you shouldn't make great decisions. Just because everything seems like a stressful struggle doesn't mean there won't be positivity at the end of it. It is. It's funny you bring up the universe and God, because that was a heavy factor on which I relied and leaned on, and it was just amazing to see the change. If you have one consistent thing in your life, I would argue that it should be God, and if you hang in there long enough, good things will happen. I'm reminded of when Conan lost the Tonight Show, and he had nothing but positive things to say about NBC and his time on the Tonight Show. He got to do the show the way he wanted it. And if you're kind and you work really hard, good things will happen. And so as I'm dealing with people struggling with, it's Iowa, there are people dealing with horrendous mental health issues. There's a lot of bipolar. There's a lot of depression. There's people. That's one of the epicenters of the opioid crisis. And I was there to motivate and encourage people. And I like to think I left the neighborhood better than I found it. So not only was I evolving, but I got to evolve Iowa, Fort Dodge, Iowa as well. And in doing so, maybe it's universal karmic reward. Maybe God needed me somewhere else, but absolutely, there's a ton of knowledge and wisdom in what you dropped in that very bold statement. And I thank you for that.
No problem. And so you're in Pittsburgh. You're with your lawyer friend.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's move number 2. So what happens next?
The next move. So during that time in good old Pittsburgh, I later found out that my buddy wasn't always paying rent on time, and so we were facing eviction. So were you a fan of any of the Mario games?
Nah, not really.
That's okay. So the analogy I was going to make is, like, in some levels you kind of control where your character is going. In some other levels, like the screen's constantly scrolling away from you, so you have to make a decision. And this was one of those times where the universe kind of forced my hand. So I reached out to everybody who I thought I had burned a bridge with, not only 4 years prior. And like, can I live in Raleigh? And I really don't. I've been on the streets once. I can do it again, but I'm like, I'm years removed from that. I don't want to take a step backwards. So right. I contact everybody in Raleigh, and they're like, yes, well, we found a cheap place. You'll be in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other guys and a kind of a bad parts. There's no real bad part of town, but bad parts of town in Raleigh, but bad part of town, whatever. But at the end of it, my rent and utilities combined and groceries combined for like $225. Wow. And I had doubled from there. I had doubled my income from minimum wage to whatever I guess $14 an hour, because minimum wage was $7.25 an hour at that point in time. So right. On top of everything else, my roommates were like, "Hey, we know you don't have a car, but since we want you to pay rent and save money, we're going to get you to work." And so that was the universe saying, "You need to be out of Pittsburgh, but you're ready for this." And during my time in Pittsburgh is actually where I got my first customer service job. Hence, I was able to pivot to a customer service job through a different temp agency in Raleigh, North Carolina. So all these pieces kind of started adding up. And as you spoke to the accumulation effect earlier, everything is starting to build on itself and create this positive feedback loop, which was very beautiful.
And what happened next? I like your story. Your story is very interesting.
Thank you.
A lot. I like your story.
Thank you so much. The next move would be marriage. The best decision I ever made in my life was proposing to my wife, my then fiance. Or no, if I would have proposed to her, she was my girlfriend. Right. I proposed to my then girlfriend Lauren. Then we went from engaged to married. So that was move number 4. I moved from one part of Raleigh to a different part of Raleigh, and at that point in time, I was still doing customer service at a kind of a toxic company and a toxic industry. We were in insurance. So I'm talking to insurance salesmen all the time. And it wasn't my favorite gig in the world. And I actually started off my marriage very depressed. I would just go get home from work and sleep all the time. And my wife decided this was not healthy. So the next move was to quit that job. And being a man, maybe you can relate to just needing to produce for your family. Is that something you jive with, you vibe with? I went from sleeping all the time to just crying all the time. Like, oh God, it's 2015 and I can't take care of myself. I'm a 30-year-old man that has to rely on my wife to feed and clean myself. And it went from one style of depression to another style of depression. But I taught myself coding, and that led me to a job at Lenovo, where they were looking for somebody to just really move data between Excel spreadsheets. And I said that was my bread and butter at this previous company, and I just taught myself to code, and I'm very interested in improving your tools and documentation processes. And I nailed the interview, got this job, and it allowed me to I doubled my income again. So I'm making a little over $20 an hour in a city that doesn't cost a lot, with very little expenses. Because at this point I still don't have a car. My wife's getting me to work. And we live in a 1-bedroom in a better neighborhood, but it's still like Raleigh's not an expensive city to live in, especially if you don't have a car. Honestly, you can live in any city in America if you don't have a car and you don't have to pay rent. So that's yeah. Anything's livable if you don't have expenses, right? But it was you were having a hard time. You were depressed. You were on the other side of depression. You were working, you found coding, you got the job. And now I'm at Lenovo, and within like 2 or 3 weeks, I had automated a majority of it. And I told my boss, I was like, I've made things better, but I'm not sure I'm needed anymore. And she said, I had the coolest boss. She sits down with me and she's like, Jimmy, there's always room for improvement, and you seem smart. So I want you to constantly be learning more things about the company. And is there any way you can apply what you've done to this department to other departments? So for the next 18 months after that, I was just automating everybody's work, and my boss was pleased, my boss's boss was pleased, and my boss's boss's boss was pleased, because prior to my arrival, we had difficulty getting out our deliverables on time. And thanks to me, everything was going out on time, and they didn't have to let anybody go. It was just, now everybody's available to help each other out in catastrophic times. And we had a catastrophe after that, which justified everybody's employment. And so I was able to save the company money without anybody losing jobs. And for me, that was the most heartwarming thing I could ever do, because, automation often comes with a loss of labor force, but I was able to make everything better for everybody. And I could really resonate with your story. And I may be a few years down the road than you are, but I remember, when you stop, right, and reflect back where you were just 4 years ago or 5 years ago to where you are today, and you think to yourself like, wow,
you know, if you know, like you said, it's possible, you know, because nothing is impossible. You know, I'm a Les Brown fanatic, right?
I
And
met that guy. He's cool.
yeah, I met him too. Yeah, and and I love Les Brown. And one of the things that he said that really changed my life, and actually my book opens up with his quote, is that you say to yourself every day that it's possible. You say to yourself every day it's possible, and that really, you know, changed my hope for life, because I had went through a period of, you know, I just got a divorce. I was down here in Miami. I didn't, you know, have any family or friends. You know, my kids were gone, and it was just me. I didn't know where I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to make it, but I just knew in my mind I was better than the current situation I was living in, and I just knew at some point in time, you know, things just has to work, because failure is just not an option. It's just absolutely not an option. I don't know how, right? Don't know when, but I just know it's going to work. So I'm curious. You know, you said you taught yourself coding and artificial intelligence. What exactly? I'm still kind of new to this AI thing. So what exactly is artificial intelligence to you?
So basically, if I had to bucket the two things, when you're programming or coding, you're establishing a set of rules on which your software is going to run. And artificial intelligence is you give the computer data instead. So programming is you set up a bunch of rules, and then you get data out of it. And artificial intelligence is kind of an inversion on that. You give it data, and it's able to establish the rules of how kind of whatever you're trying to look at works. So for pictures, if you're trying to find pictures of dogs and cats and birds and have the computer distinguish them, you classify what these animals look like, and then you feed the computer a bunch of pictures of birds and dogs and cats, and it's able to establish the rules like, okay, so a cat does not have a beak, a dog does not have retractable claws, it has maybe more rounded ears, and which is the entire kind of the black box of artificial intelligence. But that's it at a very high level. At a slightly lower level, it's a bunch of complicated statistics and calculus and linear algebra that makes magic happen. And it's a very fascinating field, also a very scary field. And if we have time, we can get into it. But that's absolutely that's the pitch, man. That's the elevator pitch.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. You know, why is it kind of scary? Because I think it scares. I think that's a good word to use, actually, because I think a lot of people, you know, there's so many movies, right? I, Robot is one that just pops into my head.
There's your disaster scenarios. What does a robot that's self-aware do to a human being who is an inferior being? We're not at that point where we need to worry yet, and it's not really a chief concern. We've had other science fiction writers who are like, well, it could be an issue, but you program it with this set of rules and it'll be fine. You just have to force the robot to never cause any harm to humans. The scary part, and it's a good pivot from the Lenovo discussion on automation, is that we're looking at 80 to 90% of the workforce being unnecessary. Now, they said the same thing when we got rid of the horse and buggy. They said the same thing during the entire industrial revolution. We've had these massive job losses or potential job losses before. And what's happened is the economy evolves to accommodate all this kind of free time and leisure time. So where we used to be a consumer goods based economy, now we're a service based economy. And so I think 80% of the jobs that exist now are I agree with that statistic that they're going to be gone, but we as human beings, constantly evolving, constantly growing, we'll find something to fill that niche. And that's the key word. Everybody will be a niche service provider in this new economy that'll come in about a year and a half. You're looking at 2020 to 2021 for this massive shift.
Well, that's soon.
That's really, yeah. Oh, absolutely. The experts in the field in the 90s were predicting what was going to be called the singularity, which is an AI that can program itself. Right. They predicted that in 2020, and Google did it last year. And so we're already ahead of schedule on a lot of things.
Right.
And so at this point, it's really the space race. Which country is going to do this first? And I really hate to say it, the U.S. is kind of behind. We don't have the the large labor force that China or India does. We're a nation of 320 million competing against nations of 1.1 and 1.3 billion people,
Right.
and there's just a staggering lack of labor and data that we have to play with, and a lack of awareness. Like I appreciate telling people what artificial intelligence is. I wish the awareness was there a year or two ago instead of asking what AI is, what's the next phase. So that's also a scary thing, is that we as the US, perpetually number one, might lose that number one status. So that frightens me a little bit. But actually, last night I was with a number of students at the University of South Florida in Temple Terrace in Tampa, Florida, who are like, no, we're going to collaborate with a bunch of other people that are on these forums in the U.S. So it's not everybody's coming together. It's a community builder, and everybody wants to build the future. Mostly because, it usually comes with billions of dollars if you can implement the future correctly, right?
Right. So like crypto, something like that, right?
Oh yeah.
and I just saw a headline, I believe it was yesterday or this week, where the Pentagon, just put, I think, $3 billion, maybe it was more than that, towards artificial intelligence in their budget line.
That's good.
So I agree with you that we're moving. Obviously we're a service-based industry. We've gotten away from consumer goods as much, and I agree with you that as a society, as a collective, we evolve, right, to to create that niche or niche, depending on where you're from in the country or how you say it. I say niche. Yeah, I say niche. So what type of opportunities then do you see? Right. So if we're transitioning to this new economy shift again that you're referring to, what type of niche or niches will be available for people to kind of get ahead of the curve that you see? So if automation is coming, because I've worked in healthcare finance and Excel and I've done all these things, and I've put all these other little programs because I was in business informatics. So I understand the whole automation stuff, and I understand that it does cost jobs, eliminates jobs. So where are those next levels of opportunities coming from?
The bunching, the next level of labor force will probably be in branding. There, to differentiate, to stand out, it's going to rely heavily on your branding. So there's going to be tons of branding jobs available. If you're AI engineers, obviously, these are people that are going to be continually updating what's called their neural networks every day. They're going to be feeding in new data, selecting new features in order to create the optimal results. There'll be a decent level of support. I imagine companies calling each other like, "Hey, my neural network is down. Can you help me out?" So there'll be a little bit of that at the human level, but it'll be mostly ground forces. Like if you consider your Google Maps. And there's a ton of automation in Google Maps, but sometimes like I'll get a little push notification. Hey, I need some human help. Like, are you sure? You're Google. You literally know that I need a gallon of milk before I do. But sometimes Google needs a little bit of help. And so I think there'll be in the short term some kind of gap filling things that artificial intelligence can't account for at the time. After that, it's really up in the air. Like we're not going to need truck drivers. We have 8 million truck drivers in the US, and the supporting infrastructure for like people that run gas stations and restaurants, that's another 12 million people. So you're talking about, when the trucking industry is automated, 20 million people without work.
And how would that be automated? By really, automated drivers?
That is correct. Tesla has already sold some. Anheuser-Busch, I believe, bought a couple 100,000 trucks.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This very, and so it's something that it again will impact everybody. And should we be afraid of it? I mean, not really. With it will come great opportunity. We'll have tons of free time. I envision if we have more and more cars, self-driving cars on the road, we'll actually need less cars overall, which means we'll need less parking spots, which means we'll have more spots for housing. And so my vision for what America should be down the line is kind of a restructuring of how we plan cities. Can we get more people into efficient homes do we continue with the urban sprawl? In either case, there'll be a need for construction workers, which in the short term won't be automatable. But this leads me to rule number 4, just the ideators. And so that's what I kind of do down here in Tampa. Is I have like a list of 100 AIs that I want to build, and I just don't have the data for them. So job number 5 is data wrangling. It's what they call the people that collect all these photos. They collect the text. Like I have a vision for automating ebook creation. Basically, if I can write a book and then I can stylize it in Shakespeare, or stylize it like in the form of a cheerleader, and then after that, automate the audio that comes with it. Go from text to speech. Just like feed the computer a couple 100,000 lines of the way I speak, and it picks up on all the subtle nuances. And at that point, you can launch an ebook in a microsecond, depending on the speed of your what's called a GPU. So yeah, that's it at a high level. There's going to be jobs. They're going to be different. It'll be exciting. It'll be, depending on how we govern it, it could be a rough transition or a smooth transition. And so maybe that's the scariest part, is the transition from one epoch to the other.
And transition is usually always the hardest part, because transition equals change, and change equals transition, and people resist change. Go ahead.
When I brought up self-driving cars, the biggest the biggest counter change is like, I always want to drive my car. Well, right? Like there's a lot of people who do not want to give up their right to drive,
right?
And that's probably going to hold back, at least in our area, the U.S. It'll hold back the self-driving car market. Whereas in places like Japan, Korea, China, Europe, they're like, oh yeah, bring on the self-driving cars. And in China, they have cars. They do have some self-driving cars, and they actually force them to drive because they have this filtration system. So what China's doing is they're encouraging kind of this urban growth, but they're also defeating their air quality problem at the same time. And so they're being really inventive with the way they're implementing all of this artificial intelligence technology.
And what do you think then about privacy settings and so forth? Because if all this stuff is going to be automated, right? Which I think is fascinating. I would be the one that would be very resistant about giving up control of the car. Absolutely. I'm driving. That's just all it is to it. I'm driving.
That's fair.
But where do we go then from a privacy perspective? How is that going to impact all these changes?
That's a good question. And so that the rule number 6 or 7, whatever, I think we're on rule 6, cybersecurity is going to be huge. As everything gets connected to this cloud and the Internet of Things, you are going to need strict security protocols, and you're going to need follow through on them, because it's going to be some people are anticipating or theorizing there's going to be just this bot war, or even just this hacker war, where everybody's just trying to steal each other's information. We see it on a daily basis. I don't think we've gone a month without hearing about nothing as extreme as Experian, but like, don't throw away your credit card if you shopped at Food Lion or Target or Walmart or a gas station. Like, these are things that are in every one of our lives on an almost daily basis. It's kind of ridiculous that we can't. Right. We were promised this future of ease, and it comes with this fear and worry. And so that's cybersecurity. Yes, will be very important. Blockchain will be really key on keeping track of privacy issues and just truthfulness. So if you saw the article on the AI where they just put in like Nick Cage's face on every actor in a movie scene, like we're coming to an era where you literally can invent your own news. You can just inject faces and audio that'll sound real, that would be undetectable by even the heaviest of Photoshop experts. And so in order to counteract that, you will need a high degree of what's called the blockchain, which it's like this heavily encrypted timestamp, which is how it's the basis, it's the skeleton of and backbone of cryptocurrency. How do I know that this Bitcoin's mine and it's real? I can tell on this audit train of blockchain that this is a real, and this transaction is real, and this whole list of transactions has been positive, and it's going to be like that does scare me. The idea that you can just invent content and stamp it as true, and it will be patently false, and there's no way to prove otherwise. Right now, we're in an era of this. We're in this fake news era, which bothers me for separate reasons. But we're at least able to factually disprove it. In 2 years, that's going to be harder to do.
Really?
And so that yes, so that but that with that comes opportunity. With that comes jobs. So it'll just be. We're not going to be a nation of retail workers forever. I won't say that the future will need college degrees, and I actually, as a private thought, I dislike the college model insofar as what it's become after 4 years. Like, these kids are 2 years behind in what's gone on in the tech world. I think we're going to rely on a continuous stream of education and a constant growth, and harkening back to this beat,
right.
Constant evolution. So
right. And I'm not a big fan of the educational system and the way it's set up and designed either. I'm not in, and maybe this is just a limiting belief on my own, I'm not really in a position to change it, or
sure.
At this point, or even pull my daughter from it and homeschool her. But you mentioned content creation, and you're a beast at content creation. What do you mean by that? Don't shy away from the statement now.
That's okay. Yeah, I hoisted myself on my own petard, I think is what they say in the cliche world. When I was living in Raleigh, I'm a huge hockey fan. The NHL went on a lockout, and I decided to write a blog a day until hockey came back. And I assumed this was only be 15 or 30 days, and I could bust out my comedy chops, I could bust out my blogging chops, and just maybe create a following this way. And it went on for 110 days. I wrote one blog a day for 110 days. And it wasn't about just hockey. It was me actively, artisanally, like, creating and crafting jokes into this blog. So I became like almost this SNL or Tonight Show writer for hockey. And 5 years later, my buddy was like, hey man, I saw you did this 50 podcast challenge. I did a one podcast a day for 50 days. Can we do a 100 blog day challenge? So we did one blog a day for 100 days. And I started off doing kind of autobiographical stuff, some travel stuff. I had just been to Italy, but I found myself getting bored. So to maximize the muscle, to keep building, to constantly evolve and grow, to build the muscle up, I'm so sorry. I decided to write satire. Like the onion.com is a news satire site. It's like The Daily Show, but on a website. It started out as just parodying newspapers and news stories. And so that's what I did. And that's why I consider myself a beast is that I can come up with 1,000 words for your target audience in the span of an hour or two, just very quickly. And that's
pretty good, because when I first got into coaching, I was in corporate, and I resigned because I just got tired of it. No longer aligned with who I was, and I realized when I resigned, I started writing, and I've kind of gone back and I started looking at some of the blogs that I had written a year and a half ago. The first thing that popped in my head was like, man, I was a terrible writer. I've greatly improved since then, but it was really more therapeutic for me.
Yes.
I just vented, and I think I vented not for 100 days straight, but at least a good 2-3 months. Every day I was putting out a new blog, and it was just venting. That's all it was. It was just me corporate bashing.
All right. Fair.
Now I'm gonna ask you a personal question, if you don't mind. Were you generating revenue from your blogs?
Negative. Oh my gosh. No revenue from the blogs, no revenue from the. Sorry, I cut off your question earlier, but you were just okay. No, I wasn't, and it's I repurposed the hockey blog into a book, but after lockout was over, nobody really cared anymore, so that book sold poorly. The blogs didn't generate anything. The blog challenge was like a Facebook only thing. We didn't really promote it or share it anywhere. And given that I was ping-ponging between autobiographical stuff or observational stuff or travel stuff or comedy stuff, it wasn't one cohesive unit that I could, as far as I can tell, that I can package into one thing.
Right.
Because I don't have the branding behind it. Nobody nobody knows who. I'm getting to the point where people know who I am now, but at the time, is what? Why should I read this? And I can't answer that question because I'm Jimmy Murray. Well, who's Jimmy Murray? Oh, it's me. It's very circular logic, and it's just the vestiges of an overconfident young man thinking that he's brought something to the world, and I haven't yet. And I guess
well, I'd beg to differ with you on that statement, and I think you've brought a tremendous amount to the world. And the world sometimes just is slow to catch up to who we are, right? And that's just life, But you clearly have shown the fortitude to continue to persevere.
I appreciate that encouragement. Thank you.
And to push forward. So I have no doubt that whatever it is you continue to try to pursue, that you're gonna achieve success, however you define success. I'm curious, real quick, the picture in the background, the drawing, is that symbolic of anything?
So when I moved to Tampa, I wanted to be like this podcast superstar, Twitch superstar, a YouTube superstar, and I opted to also try and get into the online course market, and I did, and I just wanted something that kind of constantly reflected the energy and something that I could just, if I'm getting discouraged, I can look at. And I wanted to test my doodle skills and see if I can just replicate kind of my happiness into a minor sketch. So that's just me being perpetually happy. And whenever I am sad, I don't look in the mirror because I already know I'm sad. So I don't want to make myself sadder. I'll just look at this. I'm like, oh, okay, things aren't so bad. That's a little happy sketch, Jimmy. Yay.
Yeah, I hear you. And I commend you on your transparency about dealing with depression. And acknowledging and admitting that you've been depressed, you've battled depression, that you do have sad days, and you don't want to look yourself in the mirror on sad days. I can completely relate to that. I've battled depression, anxiety, bipolar. I've been diagnosed with bipolar. I've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I shaved today after 6 days. I go through it. I'm not this, energetic person all the time. I battle, I struggle. And I think a lot of that has to do with just my own internal ambition to succeed. And sometimes when that doesn't happen as quickly, you get discouraged. What are some tips that you can offer people that you think can really change their life and get them moving in a positive direction?
When you immediately asked that, I thought you were going to talk specifically about depression. So I'll address that first. You mentioned earlier that just be proud of making your bed or tying your shoes. So if you're so sad that getting out of bed is hard, and I was there last year, when I moved to Tampa, I lost my entire social network and my entire identity again, in that I didn't have a job that I was going to every day. So just build up a set of goals. And this is really tip number 2. But target something. If you aim for nothing, you'll hit it every time, I think is the cliche there. Right. And so just have something that you can aim for. And it can be simple in the short term. And just tip number 3, just have it build and grow on itself. You want to constantly be making progress. And tip number 4, don't aim for perfection.
Right.
My latest hashtag with one of my buddies, the guy who got me involved in the blog challenges, has been hashtag progress, not perfection. So even if, let's say you're on a diet and you accidentally have, a piece of bread if you're on keto, or you accidentally have meat if you're a super vegan, just don't let that ruin your day. There have been days where I went back to bed because I felt like the one tiny microcosm of a thing was a failure. And that reminds me of a very viral Facebook thing that says, if you had 14 grand and somebody took $1 away from you, would you be upset?
Right.
No. And the analogy is, I think there's 16,000 seconds in a day. If somebody says one comment to you, and you shouldn't let that ruin the rest of your day, because you still got 16,399 other seconds to play with. So, short term, just do something that you can say you accomplished, and just keep building and growing on those accomplishments until you can create a long-term goal and a long-term project. And tip number 6 or 7, just just be in community with somebody. You opened with, how can I serve somebody today? And I think that's one of the most powerful tools we have as human beings, is how can I help somebody else? And the reason being is that when you help somebody else, it just creates a sense of community, but it makes you feel better that you've contributed to the world, and it's like trade free, right? Oftentimes we live in a capitalistic society that we need to get value for giving value. But one of the best things I did last year was just, hey, people of Hurricane Harvey, here's $100 worth of water. Take that as far as you can. A week later, being in Tampa, we had to ask for that water back. But we
such is life, right?
But Houston was all about it. Like, yeah, you helped us out, we'll help you out, and it creates a sense of community and friendship that you can't recapture in any other emotion or essence. So just find a way to help somebody in need. And you never know, ripple effect, what's going to happen down the line.
Jimmy, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I've learned a lot, about artificial intelligence. So I'm not so scared as I was before. I'm going to kind of wrap up the show, but I want to leave, parting words for the listeners today. As one of the things I do as a success coach, right? And my real niche, or niche, depending on where you're from in the country, is I work with men. And that's my real passion, is working with men, dealing with depression, dealing with anxiety, dealing with these social programmings and social expectations of how we're supposed to be, going through those little ruts of where, hey, look, I can't even provide for myself. I'm having to depend on my wife, for to get me to and from work, or to feed me and to clothe me. As men, man, that's devastating. That is soul crushing. And a lot of men sometimes can't recover from that. And they really struggle with that. They become beat down. And some of it is again, it's just social programming. It's just the way our society has been constructed. But some of it is our own doing, and our own inability to shift and evolve. What do I mean? Women are graduating from universities at a faster rate than men are. And if that is the case, then, and this is not me woman bashing by no means, because like I said earlier, I am all about equality, period. I don't think a woman should make 89 cents on the dollar. I think she should make $1 per dollar for, as a man does. And in some cases, hell, they probably deserve more money than what a man does. Because they have the emotional intelligence that men typically lack in these high power CEO, I'll stop there, those type of positions. But for men to go through that experience of not being that primary breadwinner, and to go through depression, and to battle depression, and then try to feel that I can't raise my hand and say, hey, look, I need help. Somebody please come and help me with this. I don't know how to cope with this. I don't have the emotional intelligence, which is similar, but a little bit different than artificial intelligence, right? Because you're still learning to comprehend and see all these images, and then parse out what is really real versus what is perceived, right? And so that's what I do as a coach, is help men deal with those types of things. And I love what he said, that, find somebody to serve, set goals. Even if your goals are small, especially when you're in those moments of depression and you're battling self-doubt, low self-esteem, set a small goal and just accomplish it. Because what happens through your accomplishing of goals is you start gaining momentum. And if you ever watch any type of sports, you'll hear commentators, I guarantee you 99.9% of every game you will hear the word momentum. One team either has momentum or the other team is losing momentum. And if you could ever bottle momentum up and sell it, you'll be the richest person on earth, I guarantee you. But I'm gonna offer you a free tip. This is how you gain and keep momentum. You gain momentum by creating and accomplishing small individual tasks. As those tasks, as you start accomplishing those things, then like Jimmy said earlier, then in the short term you make small goals, but in the long term your goals should start getting bigger. As your goals start getting bigger, so will your momentum. And that's how you gain momentum. And if you've lost momentum, you go back to square one, or actually square two, because square one means you didn't know what you were doing in the first place. Square two is now you have the experience of your past mistakes. So therefore, you start with the small goals again, and you reestablish your momentum that way. So this is Ivan Hunt, host of Keep It Moving this week, coming live from Miami, Florida. Till next week, peace, baby.